The gun range had gone dead silent. It wasn't the silence of discipline or respect, it was the silence of disbelief. Rows of men in tan fatigues, broad shoulders, and sculpted arms had just lowered their weapons in unison. The Navy SEALs, those icons of American toughness, were staring at the figure who had just walked into the kill zone. A woman in civilian clothes. Unassuming. Her boots looked scuffed, her jacket too light for the chill in the desert air. She didn't belong here, and every man knew it. The commanding officer's voice cut across the dust. "Ma'am, you can't be here." His tone carried that mix of authority and annoyance reserved for someone who had crossed into a place they didn't understand. The woman didn't flinch. She kept walking, hands at her sides, expression calm, too calm. The recruits exchanged smirks. One muttered under his breath, "Who let someone's mom wander in?" Another chuckled. "Probably looking for the gift shop." But then, she stopped at the painted white line, the boundary no one crossed unless they were about to prove themselves. And with a stillness that unnerved even the seasoned SEALs, she stepped over it. Into the kill zone. A ripple of disbelief rolled through the formation. The CO barked again, sharper this time. "Ma'am, that's a live fire area." The woman's eyes flicked toward the rifles now lowered to the dirt. Her voice was low, steady, but every word carried. "You said this drill was impossible. I'm here to show you it's not." For a moment, no one moved. Then laughter broke out, sharp, mocking, disbelieving. A woman who didn't even carry a weapon was about to step into their proving ground? The youngest recruit shook his head, grinning. "This is insane. She'll get herself killed." And yet, not one SEAL raised his rifle again. Something about the way she stood there, motionless, eyes steady, as though she had seen this all before, made their laughter ring hollow. The silence deepened. Dust swirled at her boots. The commanding officer clenched his jaw. He didn't know her, none of them did. But the way his men had instinctively lowered their weapons told him something he couldn't explain. This woman was not who she appeared to be. And as she took her first step deeper into the kill zone, hearts hammered in the stillness. No one knew what they were about to witness. Her name was Claire Donovan. No one at the range knew it, but her story had been carried quietly in the background of American wars for over a decade. Claire had grown up in a factory town in Pennsylvania, where silence was often the only form of strength people could afford. Her father worked steel, her mother stitched clothes in the basement for neighbors just to cover the bills. Claire had always been the one overlooked, the girl who blended into the back of classrooms, the one who teachers praised as quiet but never quite remembered by name. When she joined the army at 20, the same pattern followed her. She wasn't the loudest in the barracks. She didn't swagger. She didn't boast. She carried her gear, did her drills, and let others dismiss her as background noise. But what no one saw was the way she watched. How she studied the terrain when everyone else was laughing at jokes. How she memorized the rhythm of gunfire, not just the mechanics of it. How she noticed the trembling in a fellow soldier's hand before he even admitted he was scared. War carved its marks into her, but not in the way people expected. She lost her best friend, Mara, to an ambush in Afghanistan, a moment that taught her a brutal truth: strength wasn't about being the loudest or the toughest. It was about staying calm when chaos shredded everything you loved. By the time her tours ended, Claire had built a reputation whispered among a few, the soldier who walked straight into kill zones, not because she was reckless, but because she knew exactly how to read them. A ghost of the battlefield. But when she left the service, that story didn't follow her. Back home, she was just another veteran trying to stitch her life together. Employers barely glanced at her resume. Neighbors remembered her only as that quiet woman who lives alone. She worked odd jobs, wore her scars under long sleeves, and let the world forget. Until today. The SEALs didn't know that the civilian in their midst had once stood in fields littered with shrapnel, steadying a wounded platoon with nothing but her voice. They didn't know she had stared down insurgent fire so close she could feel the heat of the bullets. All they saw was a woman in worn boots crossing a line she wasn't supposed to cross. Claire heard their laughter. She felt the sting of it in her chest, sharp and familiar, like all the years of being dismissed. And yet, she kept walking. The officer's words still rang behind her, "Ma'am, that's a live-fire area." But she wasn't here to prove something to him. She was here because one of the recruits, barely 20, had muttered earlier during a break, "No one survives this drill. It's just to show us we're not good enough." That voice had lit something inside her. She had carried that same weight once, the belief that the world was designed to prove her unworthy. She wouldn't let it stand. So here she was, under the desert sun, walking where she didn't belong. The sound of rifles resetting clicked faintly around her, but none fired. Every SEAL was watching, waiting. And for the first time in years, Claire let herself breathe deep. This wasn't about proving she was better than them. It was about proving something far quieter. That dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't need permission. It simply walks forward, step by step, until even the strongest men have no choice but to listen. The line of targets stretched ahead, metal silhouettes half hidden in the haze of heat. The kill zone was designed to overwhelm even the best, sudden crossfire simulations, shifting cover, unpredictable traps. The recruits had failed it all week. Now a lone woman was stepping into it without a rifle. The SEALs exchanged looks. Some still smirked, though uneasily. Others shifted their weight, the beginnings of respect tugging at their doubt. Claire paused, her eyes sweeping the field. The silence was suffocating, punctuated only by the distant rattle of a flag against its pole. She let her shoulders rise with a steady breath, then whispered, almost to herself, "Predict the chaos, or it will own you." It was something her old sergeant used to say, and she carried it like scripture. A recruit scoffed from the back. "What's she gonna do, stare the targets down?" His laugh was forced. No one joined him. Claire crouched low, pressing her palm to the dirt. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, feeling the vibration of the hidden mechanisms buried beneath. The kill zone wasn't random, it never was. Every trap followed a rhythm. Every shot had a tell. When the first target clanged to life, she was already moving. A quick pivot, a lean to the right, too fast, too precise to be luck. The dummy round hissed past, slamming into the dirt where she'd been standing. Gasps rippled from the sidelines. Another target whirred open to her left. Claire dropped, rolled, and came up behind a concrete barrier as though she had rehearsed it 100 times. Her body moved with instinct born of years in combat, each motion efficient, stripped of wasted energy. The SEALs' rifles hummed forgotten at their sides. They weren't laughing now. Claire didn't smile, didn't perform. Her face was calm, focused, her breathing controlled. She wasn't trying to impress them, she was simply surviving, as she always had. Trap after trap triggered, and each time, she waited a split second before it struck. The field became a conversation between her and the chaos, and she answered with a grace that looked less like defiance and more like inevitability. One of the younger SEALs whispered, almost reverently, "She's reading the zone." The commanding officer's jaw tightened. He had seen men freeze here, seen them crumble under the pressure. But this woman, this stranger, moved as if she had lived her whole life preparing for this moment. By the time Claire reached the halfway mark, sweat streaked her temple, her chest heaving, but her steps never faltered. Every motion spoke of something the men watching had forgotten in their own pursuit of strength. Survival isn't loud. Dignity isn't flashy. True strength is silent, steady, and unshakable. And Claire Donovan embodied it with every step deeper into the kill zone. The final gauntlet loomed. Instructors had designed it to break morale, overlapping fire lanes, traps triggered in impossible sequence, nowhere to hide. Recruits called it the graveyard. No one cleared it without being pulled out by screaming medics or shouting officers. Claire slowed, her boots crunching in the dirt. The SEALs leaned forward, every face taut. She whispered again, soft, steady, "Predict the chaos." The gauntlet erupted. Metal targets snapped open, rounds cracked through the air, dust kicked at her heels. Claire didn't fight the storm. She flowed through it, ducking under fire, sliding behind barriers, sprinting when instinct demanded it, stopping dead when silence gave her warning. The SEALs watched, breathless. Every step she took shattered their certainty that the drill was unbeatable. At the final barricade, Claire hesitated only a moment, then stood tall, shoulders squared, and walked the last 10 yards upright, bullets snapping inches from her. Not defiant, not reckless, but calm. Unbroken. When she crossed the finish line, the range fell silent. No one clapped. No one cheered. They simply stood there, stunned, their rifles slack in their hands. For the first time, they understood why they had lowered their weapons when she entered the zone. The commanding officer stepped forward, voice hoarse. "Who are you?" Claire met his eyes. Her voice carried no pride, no demand, only truth. "Just someone who's been where you are. Someone who knows it isn't impossible." Silence stretched. Then, slowly, one SEAL straightened, hand tightening in a salute. Another followed. Then another. Until the entire line of men stood at attention, weapons lowered, honoring the quiet woman who had just reminded them what dignity looked like. Claire didn't smile. She simply nodded once, turned, and walked away, boots carrying her back across the line, into the dust, where she belonged. The recruits would talk about it for years. Not the impossible drill, not the humiliation of being shown up by a civilian. They would talk about the way she walked, steady, calm, and utterly unafraid. Because dignity, they finally understood, doesn't need to shout. It only needs to step forward, once, when the world isn't expecting it.